I gave him 15 years. 15 years of my life, my paycheck, my loyalty. I fixed his house, raised his daughter, paid his bills. Then one Tuesday night, his daughter told one lie, just one, and within 3 hours, I was standing in the rain with nowhere to go. They changed the locks, called me dangerous, took everything. But here's what they didn't know, my name was the only one on that deed. And when the truth walks up their driveway with a badge, there's nowhere left to hide. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type interested in the comments. And I will give you a heart. The night it happened didn't start like a night that was going to change everything. It started like any other Tuesday in Dayton, Ohio. Gray sky, wet streets, my boots tracking in damp leaves. I didn't feel like sweeping off the porch again. I'd worked a 12-hour shift at the hospital. Not the glamorous part of a hospital either. I was the woman who kept the lights on, the air moving, the boilers behaving, the doors locking. Facilities management. The kind of job you only notice when it stops working. My hands smelled faintly of machine oil and disinfectant. That hospital has a smell you can't scrub out of your skin. Bleach, old coffee, and something metallic that sits in the back of your throat. I washed up at the sink, rolled my sleeves down, and went home. David had made chicken casserole, the easy kind with canned cream soup and those crunchy onions on top. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm. It was familiar. We ate at the table that had a little wobble in the back left leg, the one I kept meaning to fix. The TV was on low in the living room. Local news, a car dealership ad, then some weather guy warning about the storm rolling in from the west. Then Maya showed up late, like she always did, letting the screen door slap behind her. She didn't knock. She never knocked. She lived with us off and on since her 20s, drifting in when she needed to get back on her feet, drifting out when she met someone new or got tired of rules. She was wearing leggings and a sweatshirt with a college logo she never attended. Her hair was pulled up in a messy bun. She smelled like fruity vape and cheap vanilla perfume. David's daughter. 32 years old and still acting like the world owed her something. I'm talking about a grown woman who couldn't hold down a job for more than 6 months, who borrowed money like it was oxygen, who treated her home like a hotel she didn't have to pay for. And me? I was the woman who paid the mortgage, fixed the leaks, kept the heat on, and somehow still ended up being the villain in her story. Hey, David said, forcing cheer into his voice. We saved you some. Maya slid into the chair, eyes already on her phone. Thanks, she mumbled. I didn't say much. After 15 years with David, I'd learned there were 2 kinds of nights. Nights you talked and nights you kept your head down. Maya had a mood to her, a tightness like a rubber band wound too far. David asked her how work was going. Maya sighed dramatically like a teenager. Fine, she said. Whatever. That's Maya's favorite word. Whatever. It means don't ask me questions. Don't expect anything from me. Don't make me feel like I owe you. And let me tell you something about that word. When a grown adult uses whatever like a shield, what they're really saying is, I refuse to be accountable. They're telling you that your feelings don't matter, your questions are annoying, and your existence is an inconvenience. I should have seen it then. That casual dismissal was practice for what was coming. I took my plate to the sink and started rinsing it. The casserole dish sat on the counter, still steaming a little. The rain had started tapping at the window above the sink, soft at first, then steadier. David wiped the table. Maya scrolled. The TV droned on about a new donut place opening near the highway. Normal. Everything felt so achingly normal. And that's the thing about Betrayal, isn't it? It doesn't announce itself with trumpets and warning signs. It sits at your dinner table wearing leggings and a college sweatshirt, scrolling through its phone while you wash the dishes in a house you pay for. And then, out of nowhere, Maya's phone made a little ding sound. She froze. Her thumb stopped moving. I watched her face change in a way that made the hair on my arms lift. Her eyes widened and her lips parted like she'd seen a ghost. Then she looked up at David. Dad, she said, and her voice went thin, almost trembling. Can I talk to you? Like, right now? David glanced at me, then back at Maya. Sure, what is it? Maya stood up, phone clutched in her hand like evidence. She didn't go to her room. She didn't ask for privacy. She walked right into the kitchen where I stood at the sink, water running. David followed her. And Maya pointed at me. "It's her," she said. I blinked. "What?" Maya held the phone out toward David, but she angled it so I couldn't see. "I knew something was off," she said. "I knew it. And now I have proof." David's eyebrows pinched together. "Maya, what are you talking about?" Maya swallowed, then took a shaky breath like she was about to confess something brave. "She's been messing with my stuff," she said. "My accounts. My money." Let me pause here and tell you what that felt like. You know that moment in a nightmare when you're falling and you can't grab onto anything? When gravity just takes you and there's nothing you can do but drop. That's what it felt like. Except I was awake, standing in my own kitchen, at my own sink, in my own house. And this woman, this 32-year-old woman I'd fed and housed and helped for years, was pointing at me like I was a criminal. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like I'd missed a step on the stairs. "What are you saying?" I asked. Maya's eyes flicked to me. There was something in them. Cold calculation buried under fake fear. "I'm saying," she continued, "I checked my email. And there are logins from this house. From here. I didn't do it." She paused for effect. "And I found messages. Threatening messages. Like she's watching me. Like she's unstable." That word hit me like a slap. Unstable. The kind of word that turns you into a problem instead of a person. The kind of word that makes everything you say sound like a symptom. I turned off the water and faced them fully. "David, that's not true. I haven't touched Maya's accounts. I don't even know her passwords." Maya let out a little laugh that wasn't funny. "Of course you'd say that." David's eyes darted between us. Why would Maya make that up? And there it was. The question that would define everything that came after. Not, "Did this happen?" Not, "Can we check the facts?" But why would she lie? Because to David, the very idea that his daughter could fabricate something this serious was impossible. She was his baby, his little girl. Even at 32, even with a trail of failed jobs and broken promises behind her, even with every red flag waving in his face, she was still innocent in his eyes. And me? I was just the woman he'd been with for 15 years. Apparently, that counted for nothing. My mouth opened and nothing came out at first. Because I had a lot of answers and none of them would sound good. Because Maya made things up all the time. She made up excuses. She made up stories. She made up a version of herself where she was always the victim and everyone else was the villain. But I'd never seen her go for my throat like this. "I don't know," I said, and my voice sounded tired. "But it's not true." Maya's chin quivered just enough to look convincing. "Dad, I'm scared," she whispered. "I'm scared for you." David stiffened like those words plugged into something primal inside him. Protect the child. Believe the crying daughter. Even if the daughter was grown and the tears were a performance. Even if the woman standing accused had spent 15 years proving her loyalty, her love, her commitment. None of that mattered. Because blood, apparently, is thicker than truth. I try to keep my tone even. "David, listen to me. You know me. You've lived with me for 15 years. David's eyes flashed. "Then why does Maya feel scared?" "Because she's manipulating you," I blurted before I could stop myself. Maya gasped like I'd punched her. "See? See how she talks? That's what I mean." David took a step toward me, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen directed at me before. Not just anger. Not just hurt. It was disgust. "You don't get to call my daughter a liar," he snapped. I felt heat rise up my neck. My heart thumped hard in my chest. Outside, the rain picked up, rattling against the window. Wind shoved the branches of the maple tree by the driveway. "David," I said, slow and clear, "Maya is lying. I'm telling you straight. She's lying." David's hands curled into fists. "Stop." Maya's voice got softer, sweeter. "Dad, I don't want to make a big deal. I need to feel safe." Safe. Another loaded word. Another word that could turn me into a threat with one breath. Another word designed to make me the monster in a story I didn't even know I was in. And here's what I need you to understand. When someone uses your love against you, when they weaponize safety and fear and protection to paint you as dangerous, they're not just lying. They're erasing you. They're turning 15 years of your life into evidence of guilt. Every kind thing you did becomes suspicious. Every boundary you set becomes controlling. Every moment you stood your ground becomes proof that you were the problem all along. David stared at me for a long second, then his shoulders rose as he took in air. And he let it out as a scream. "Get out." The sound bounced off the cabinets, off the refrigerator, off the tile floor I'd mopped last weekend. It didn't sound like my partner. It sounded like a stranger living in his body. "Get out of my house," he shouted. "You don't belong here anymore." I stood there, water still dripping from my hands, watching Maya's mouth tighten at the corners just for a second. Like she was trying not to smile. Like she'd just won a game I didn't know we were playing. And in that moment, I understood something that would take me weeks to fully process. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't a misunderstanding that escalated. This was planned, calculated. Maya had been setting this up, brick by brick, and I'd been too busy working, too busy fixing things, too busy being loyal to notice the trap closing around me. My first instinct was to argue, to defend myself, to list every bill I paid, every broken thing I fixed, every night I sat up with David when he cried about money, every time I bailed Maya out of some mess without making David feel guilty. But I looked at David's face and realized I was already convicted. The trial was over before I even knew it had started. So I did the only thing I could do with any dignity left. I took my work jacket off the hook by the back door, the one that still smelled like oil and winter air, and I put it on. I grabbed my wallet and my phone off the counter. My keys were in the little bowl by the door next to David's. David stood with his arms crossed, breathing hard, eyes wide, like he'd just set something on fire and wasn't sure if it would burn the whole house down. Maya stood behind him, clutching her phone like it was a weapon. And maybe it was. I opened the door. Cold wind slapped me in the face. Rain sprayed in sideways. The porch light was off. The yard looked dark and unfamiliar. I stepped out anyway. And I didn't look back. Not because I was strong. Not because I was sure of myself. But because if I looked back, if I saw David's face one more time, I might have begged. I might have pleaded. I might have erased myself completely just to be allowed back inside. And I'd already spent 15 years making myself smaller. I wasn't going to disappear completely. Not for anyone. Not even for love. Especially not for love that could be destroyed with one lie and 3 hours. But here's what they didn't know. Here's what Maya didn't account for in her little performance. Here's the detail that would change everything. That house? The one David just screamed at me to get out of? The one Maya was already planning to treat like her personal kingdom? My name was the only one on the deed. And sometimes, the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to show up with paperwork. The police didn't show up with lights and sirens. No drama, no neighbors gawking. Just a calm voice on the other end of the phone, steady and professional, like he was calling to remind me my car warranty had expired. "Ms. Ellison, this is Officer Tom Reynolds with the Dayton Police Department. We just need to ask you a few questions." I was sitting in my car behind the mire on Wilmington Pike. Engine off, windows fogging from my breath. It was 1:07 in the morning. The rain had slowed to a cold drizzle, the kind that seeps into your bones instead of soaking your clothes. "Am I being arrested?" I asked. There was a pause. Not a long one. Just enough. "No, ma'am," he said. "We received a complaint. We're doing a welfare check." Welfare. Another one of those words that sounds harmless until it's pointed at you. Like unstable. Like unsafe. Words that sound clinical and reasonable, but carry the weight of accusation underneath. I leaned my head back against the cracked vinyl seat and stared at the ceiling. "Ask your questions." Officer Reynolds was polite. Too polite for a man who thought he was talking to a criminal. He asked where I was. I told him. He asked if I'd left the house voluntarily. I said yes. He asked if I'd threatened my stepdaughter in any way. "No," I said. "Never." Another pause. I could hear paper shuffling. Maybe a pen scratching. Somewhere behind him, a door closed. "Ma'am," he said, "do you and your partner own the house together?" The question landed wrong, like a note out of tune. What? "The house on Briarwood Drive," he clarified. "Is your name on the deed?" I swallowed. "Yes. Mine is." Only yours. I thought of David at the kitchen table years ago, shoulders slumped, a stack of bills between us. I remembered his voice, tired and embarrassed. I don't want my name on anything anymore. I messed things up once. I don't want to mess up your credit too. He declared bankruptcy 3 years into our relationship. Medical bills from a surgery that went wrong, credit card debt from his ex-wife, a car loan he couldn't afford. I didn't judge him for it. I helped him rebuild. I took on the mortgage alone, put the utilities in my name, handled the refinance when rates dropped. I did it because I loved him, because partnership meant carrying weight when your person couldn't. Yes, I said slowly. Only mine. There was another pause, longer this time. Thank you, ma'am, Officer Reynolds said. That's all for now. We'll note that you cooperated. And the complaint? I asked. It's vague, he admitted. No evidence of immediate danger. If there's anything else, we'll follow up. The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a long time after that, the screen glowing weakly in the dark car. Vague. That was it. One lie. One shaky story. Enough to throw me out of my own house, but not enough to hold up under even the lightest pressure. I laughed once, a short, dry sound that surprised me. Then the cold crept back in. Let me tell you what it feels like to sit in a parking lot at 1 in the morning with nowhere to go. It feels like being erased. Like the life you built, the home you paid for, the love you invested, all of it can be deleted with one phone call and a convincing cry. You start questioning everything. Did I miss something? Was I blind? Was I the problem all along? And that's exactly what they want you to think. That's how manipulation works. It doesn't just take your house or your money or your peace. It takes your sense of reality. It makes you doubt your own memory, your own worth, your own right to exist in a space you created. I drove to my sister Rachel's place on the west side, the Impala humming low, windshield wipers squeaking like they always did when it rained. Rachel's porch light was on when I pulled up, like she'd been waiting. She didn't ask why I was there. She just opened the door, stepped aside, and said, "Boots off. Coffee's on." That's Rachel. 60 years old, retired union electrician. Hands like tree roots and a face that's seen enough to know when not to ask. I slept on her couch with my jacket folded under my head. The cushions smelled like sawdust and old cologne. I woke up before dawn with my heart racing, the words, "You don't belong here anymore," still echoing in my head. Rachel slid a mug across the table when I came into the kitchen. Gas station coffee, strong and bitter. I wrapped my hands around it and stared into the steam. "He really kicked you out?" she asked. I nodded. "Over Maya," she guessed. I nodded again. Rachel sighed through her nose. "That girl's trouble." I didn't argue. I didn't defend her. I was past that. After Rachel left to run errands, I pulled out my phone and started digging. 15 years of emails, mortgage statements, refinance paperwork, county records I'd never had a reason to look at before. There it was. A PDF from 2012. Warranty deed. My name. Only my name. My chest tightened. I checked again and again. No David. No joint ownership. Just me. My hands started to shake, not from fear, but from something else. A slow, creeping realization that the ground under this whole mess wasn't as solid as David and Maya thought it was. I thought about Maya's face when she accused me. About the way she'd said unstable like she'd practiced it. About how fast David had turned on me, like 15 years could be erased with one word. I closed my eyes. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired and sad and angry in a quiet, dangerous way. But for the first time since David screamed at me to get out, I felt something else too. Leverage. And here's the thing about leverage. It's not about revenge. It's not about being cruel. It's about having something that can't be taken from you, something that exists on paper, in reality, beyond emotion and manipulation and lies. It's about having proof when someone tries to rewrite history. Because that's what they were doing. David and Maya were already rewriting the story in their heads. I was the villain, the unstable woman, the threat. And they were the victims who bravely stood up to me and reclaimed their safety. Except none of that was true. And truth has a funny way of surviving, even when people try to bury it. I picked up my phone and searched for a local attorney. Nothing flashy. No billboards. Just a name that kept popping up in reviews. Diane Keller. I stared at her number for a long moment before dialing. And when she answered, professional and direct, I said the words I'd been holding in my throat since Tuesday night. I need help. I was thrown out of my own house. Diane Keller's office sat above a barber shop on a quiet side street downtown. The kind of place you'd drive past 100 times without noticing. No flashy sign, just her name in plain black letters on frosted glass and a narrow stairway that smelled faintly of old paper and lemon cleaner. She was in her late 40s, maybe early 50s, hair pulled back tight, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. Her handshake was firm, but not performative. She didn't waste time with sympathy, and I appreciated that. Start from the beginning, she said, clicking a pen. And don't skip the boring parts. The boring parts are usually where the truth lives. So I told her everything. The casserole. The rain. Maya's voice turning soft and scared like a switch had flipped. David's scream. The police call. I told her about the refinance, about David's bankruptcy, about the deed with only my name on it. Diane listened without interrupting, nodding now and then, her pen scratching notes. When I finished, she leaned back and exhaled slowly. Okay, she said. First things first. You did the right thing by leaving. I frowned. I lost my house. She shook her head. No, you lost access to it. Big difference. She slid the deed copy across the desk toward me. This house is legally yours. Sole ownership. That gives you options. But if you rush in angry, you'll blow half of them. I stared at the paper. My name looked strange there, like it belonged to someone else. So what do? Diane met my eyes. You don't confront. You don't explain. You don't text. You don't post. You document. And you wait. Waiting had never been my strength. I'd spent my whole life fixing things when they broke. Leaky pipes, jammed doors, broken relationships. But this wasn't something I could fix with a wrench and a long night. This required something I'd never been good at. Patience. Strategic silence. Letting other people show their hands while I kept mine hidden. Over the next week, I learned a new kind of patience. I stayed at Rachel's place, sleeping on the couch, showering at odd hours so I wouldn't get in her way. Every morning I drove past my own house on Briarwood Drive on my way to work. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. But I looked. David's car was still there. Maya's too. Lights on late. Music sometimes, bass thumping through the walls I'd insulated myself years ago. Once I saw Maya on the porch, laughing into her phone, cigarette smoke curling around her head like she didn't have a care in the world. Like she hadn't just destroyed someone's life for sport. At work, I messed up a maintenance schedule and caught hell from my supervisor. I forgot my lunch in the break room fridge and didn't notice until the end of my shift. I felt off, like a woman walking around without her skin. At night, I replayed the scene in my head. Maya's accusation. David's face. I kept thinking I'd missed something. Some earlier warning sign I'd ignored. Some moment when I could have stopped this before it started. Then Diane called. I ran a credit check, she said. With your permission. There's something you need to see. We met again that afternoon. She turned her monitor toward me and scrolled. Maya had been busy. Store credit cards. A phone account. A small personal loan. All tied to my address. Some overdue. Some maxed out. I didn't open these, I said, my jaw tight. I know, Diane replied. But here's the thing. These don't just explain her lie. They explain her timing. My stomach sank. Explain. If you'd moved back in, she said, or if you'd started asking questions, she risked exposure. So she reframed you as the threat first. I thought of the way Maya had looked at me across the kitchen. The fear that had seemed staged but convincing enough to work. She didn't want me gone, I said quietly. She needed me gone. Diane nodded. Exactly. The realization didn't bring relief. It brought a different kind of hurt. One that settled deep, like damp in your bones. Because it meant this wasn't about me at all. It wasn't about something I'd done or said. It wasn't about being unstable or threatening or wrong. It was about Maya protecting herself from consequences. And David? David was just collateral damage in his daughter's con. He chose her without question because that's what parents do, right? They protect their children. Even when their children are 32. Even when their children are lying. Even when protecting them means sacrificing someone who'd spent 15 years loving them both. But here's what happens when you sacrifice the truth to keep the peace. The peace doesn't last. The lie gets bigger. And eventually, reality shows up. And when it does, it doesn't knock politely. David still hadn't called. Not once. No apology, no questions, just silence. And somehow that silence said more than any argument ever could. It said I wasn't worth a conversation. It said 15 years could end without explanation. It said Maya's word, delivered with tears and trembling voice, carried more weight than a decade and a half of my actions. That kind of silence isn't peaceful. It's violent. It's erasure disguised as indifference. Then late one night, my phone buzzed. David. The message was short. We need to talk. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then I set the phone face down and went to bed. Because here's what I'd learned in that week of sleeping on Rachel's couch. Not every conversation deserves a response. Not every demand for your attention deserves your energy. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Let them sit in the silence they created. Let them wonder. Let them stew in the consequences of their choices while you build your case in the shadows. The next day, Diane walked me through the next steps. Filing for exclusive occupancy. Preparing notice. Documenting every interaction. Screenshots of Maya's social media posts about toxic women and protecting family. Copies of the lock change receipt David had emailed to himself without realizing I still had access to the shared account. Do not respond, Diane reminded me. Silence is not weakness. It's strategy. And let me tell you something about strategy that nobody teaches you when you're young and in love and building a life with someone. Strategy isn't romantic. It isn't passionate. It doesn't feel good in the moment. But it works. While David and Maya were celebrating their victory, posting cryptic messages online, changing locks, settling into my house like conquerors, I was building a paper trail that would bury them both. Not with lies. Not with drama. Just with facts, dates, documents, truth in black and white. One afternoon, while I was at Rachel's kitchen table sorting papers, David called again. This time I answered. Hey, he said, and his voice sounded normal. Too normal. Like we were old friends catching up, not two people whose relationship had imploded 6 days ago. We need money. I closed my eyes. For what? I asked. Things are tight, he said. You know how it is. Maya's been under a lot of stress. I almost laughed. Almost. I'll have my lawyer contact you, I said. There was a sharp intake of breath. Your lawyer? Yes. He hung up without another word. And I sat there in Rachel's kitchen, staring at my phone, feeling something shift inside me. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even hurt. It was clarity. Cold, clean, unshakable clarity. They didn't kick me out because I was dangerous. They kicked me out because Maya needed me gone and David would do anything to keep his daughter happy. And now that I was gone, now that they had the house to themselves, they wanted my money too. They wanted me erased, but still accessible. Gone, but still paying. Absent, but still responsible. Let me ask you something. Have you ever loved someone so much that you made yourself smaller just to fit into their life? Have you ever paid bills that weren't yours, fixed problems you didn't create, swallowed words that needed to be said just to keep the peace? Have you ever been the one who stayed calm while everyone else fell apart? The one who kept things running while everyone else took credit? The one who sacrificed and compromised and bent until you forgot what your own spine felt like? If you have, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know that specific kind of exhaustion that comes from loving people who see your loyalty as weakness, who see your kindness as permission, who see your silence as agreement to be erased. And maybe, just maybe, you also know what it feels like when you finally stop. When you finally say no. When you finally choose yourself after years of choosing everyone else. That night I sat alone in my car outside Rachel's place, engine idling, radio low. An old country song came on. One David used to hum while folding laundry. I turned it off. For the first time since this started, I didn't feel like a woman waiting to be rescued. I felt like a woman standing on the edge of something irreversible. My phone buzzed again. A text from Diane. "Do you still have your spare keys and the garage code?" "Yes," I typed back. There was a pause. "Good," she replied. "Don't use them." "Not yet." I leaned back in the seat, staring up at the dark Ohio sky, and understood what she meant. This wasn't about getting back in. It was about letting the truth walk in on its own. About letting them get comfortable in their lie. About giving them enough rope to hang themselves while I stood back and watched. And maybe that sounds cold to you. Maybe you think I should have been the bigger person. Should have forgiven. Should have reached out. Should have tried to fix it. But let me tell you what being the bigger person gets you. It gets you 15 years of carrying someone else's weight. It gets you kicked out in the rain. It gets you called unstable by a woman you fed and housed. It gets you abandoned by a man you loved. Being the bigger person gets you erased. And I was done being erased. David didn't call again for a while. Neither did Maya. That silence felt strange at first, like the quiet after a storm when you're waiting to see what's been knocked loose. Then I realized something else was happening. They thought they'd won. I started seeing it in small ways. Maya's social media posts popped up in my peripheral vision, screenshots Rachel sent me with a raised eyebrow emoji, quotes about cutting toxic people out, a selfie on my front porch, her head tilted just right so the house looked like a prize behind her, a picture of her holding a mug I recognized instantly, blue ceramic, hairline crack near the handle. I bought that mug in Nashville in 2010. David and I had gone down for a week and stayed in a cheap hotel near the river. He said it reminded him of my hands. Solid. Dependable. Seeing Maya wrap her fingers around it made my jaw clench. But I didn't comment. Didn't react. Didn't give her the satisfaction of knowing I'd seen it. Because that's what she wanted. She wanted me to lash out, to look crazy, to prove her story right. And I wasn't going to give her that. At work, I kept my head down. The hospital didn't care that my relationship had blown up. Air handlers still needed filters. Doors still stuck. I missed a valve on a routine check one afternoon and caught myself just before it turned into a bigger problem. My supervisor glanced at me and said, "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just tired." That was true. I was bone tired. The kind that sleep doesn't touch. One evening, Rachel slid a plate of meatloaf across the table and said, "You're grinding your teeth." I hadn't noticed. I forced myself to unclench my jaw. I keep thinking if I'd said something different. Rachel shook her head. You could have read him the Bible and he'd still have believed his kid. She wasn't wrong. The lock change receipt came through our old shared email account late one night. David must have forgotten I still had access. There it was in black and white. Date, time, company name. I forwarded it to Diane without comment. She replied with a single word. Perfect. A week later, David called again. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hey," he said. No apology. No warmth. "We need to straighten some things out." His tone was businesslike, like we were coworkers who'd had a disagreement over scheduling. "I've asked my lawyer to handle communications," I said. He scoffed. "A lawyer? Over this?" "This," I repeated calmly, "is exactly why." There was a pause. I could hear Maya in the background, her voice low but sharp. David turned away from the phone, muttering something I couldn't make out. Then he came back on the line. "Maya's under a lot of stress. Bills, car trouble, you know how things add up." I looked out the windshield at Rachel's driveway. Cracked concrete I'd helped patch years ago. "I'm sure they do." "So," David continued, "we thought maybe you could help out. Just until things settle." There it was. Not guilt. Not regret. An invoice. "I won't be sending money," I said. David inhaled sharply. "After everything we've been through," "Yes," I said. "After everything." He hung up. That night Diane emailed me a draft notice. Formal language. Dry. Precise. It felt strange seeing my life reduced to paragraphs and bullet points, but there was comfort in it too. Paper doesn't lie. Paper doesn't shout. Paper doesn't change its story depending on who's crying. We filed for exclusive occupancy and scheduled service through the sheriff's office. Diane warned me it wouldn't be immediate. There were steps. Notices. Timelines. "Let them keep thinking they're safe," she said. "People make mistakes when they think no one's watching." Maya made plenty. She started having friends over. Cars parked half up on the lawn. Music louder. Trash bags piled near the garage. A neighbor texted Rachel, assuming the message would get to me somehow. "Everything okay over there?" the text read. I didn't reply. I documented. One afternoon, Maya posted a long rant about women who think money equals control. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. The comments rolled in. Sympathy. Encouragement. Hearts and angry faces. Diane saved every screenshot. I tried not to watch too closely. It wasn't good for me. But sometimes late at night, I'd sit in my car with the engine off and look at the house from down the block. Lights on. Shadows moving. My house, occupied by people who thought I was gone for good. The urge to confront rose up in me like acid. To march up there, pound on the door, demand my life back. Every time it did, I remembered Diane's voice. Silence is strategy. Then came the call I wasn't expecting. David again. This time he sounded different. Edgier. "We need to talk," he said. "In person." "No," I replied. "Come on," he snapped, irritation bleeding through. "This is getting ridiculous." "What's ridiculous," I said evenly, "is that you threw me out over a lie and haven't apologized once." Silence. Maya says I cut him off. "Have your lawyer talk to mine." There was a sharp breath, then the click of the line going dead. I sat there afterward, phone in my hand, heart pounding. Saying no didn't feel good. It felt necessary. Like setting a broken bone. Painful but required for healing. The next morning, a message from Diane lit up my screen. "We're set," it read. "Tomorrow. 11:30 a.m. Be there. Say nothing unless asked." I stared at the time for a long moment. Tomorrow. I went to work and fixed what needed fixing. I came home to Rachel's and folded my jacket, smoothing out the creases. I slept in short stretches, waking to the hum of the refrigerator and the weight of 15 years pressing down on my chest. At 10:45 the next morning, I drove toward Briarwood Drive. The sky was a pale Ohio blue, cold and clear. The street looked the same as it always had, except this time I wasn't the one being watched. This time I was the one holding all the cards. And they had no idea what was coming. The sheriff's cruiser pulled up right on time. 11:29 a.m. I was already there, parked a few houses down, engine off, hands resting on my thighs to keep them from shaking. I'd worn my work jacket, the one with my name stitched on the chest in faded blue thread. Not to make a statement. Just because it was mine. The cruiser stopped in front of the house like it had done this 100 times before. No lights. No siren. Just tires on pavement and a door opening with a solid, final thud. David opened the front door before the sheriff even reached the steps. He must have been watching through the blinds. He wore jeans and a sweater, hair uncombed, face drawn. He looked smaller than I remembered. Tired. Maya appeared behind him, barefoot, arms folded, face already set in that familiar mix of defiance and wounded innocence. Across the street, curtains moved. Mrs. Gladys Meyer stood at her living room window, hands on her hips. She'd lived on that block longer than anyone. If something happened on Briarwood Drive, Gladys knew. The sheriff spoke first. Calm. Measured. "Sir," he said, "I'm here to serve notice." David blinked. "Notice of what?" The sheriff opened the folder. "This property is legally owned by Ms. Sarah Ellison," he read. "Sole ownership. You and any other occupants are required to vacate the premises in accordance with this order." Maya laughed. A short, sharp sound. "That's not possible." The sheriff didn't look at her. "Miss, this doesn't require your agreement." David's face drained of color. "There must be a mistake," he said. "My partner," the sheriff lifted his eyes. "Your name is not on the deed, sir." Silence fell hard. I saw it ripple down the block. A neighbor stepped out onto her porch. Another pretended to check the mail. Mrs. Gladys leaned closer to the glass. Maya's confidence cracked. "No," she said. "Dad, tell him. Tell him he's wrong." David's mouth opened. Closed. He looked at the sheriff. Then, finally, he looked at me. I stepped forward then. Slow and deliberate. Every footstep felt heavy, like I was walking through mud. "I didn't come to argue," I said. "I came to take my life back." The words landed and stayed there. Maya's eyes filled with tears instantly. She turned to the sheriff, voice trembling. "Officer, I don't feel safe. She's always been unstable." There it was again. That word. The sheriff glanced at her, then back at his paperwork. "That allegation is noted," he said. "Neutral. It doesn't change the order." Maya's shoulders shook. She cried louder now. The kind of cry meant to draw attention, to pull sympathy out of thin air. No one moved to comfort her. David swayed slightly, like he might sit down on the porch steps. "Sarah," he whispered, "we can talk about this." I shook my head once. We had 15 years to talk. The sheriff cleared his throat. "You'll be given time to gather personal belongings. Any resistance will be documented." Mrs. Gladys opened her front door and leaned out. "Well," she said loudly, "I always wondered how Maya afforded all that new stuff." Maya snapped her head toward the sound, fury flashing through her tears. The sheriff turned another page. "There are also pending inquiries related to financial activity connected to this address," he said. "You may be contacted regarding that separately." Maya went very still. David looked between us, understanding dawning too late. He pressed a hand to his mouth. And let me tell you what I felt in that moment. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty, clean, like a wound that had finally stopped bleeding. Like something rotten had been cut out and now there was just space where it used to be. Painful space. Honest space. Space that could finally heal. As the sheriff stepped back toward his cruiser, I looked at the house one last time. The porch. The door. The windows I'd replaced myself after a storm years ago. The gutters I'd cleaned every fall. The garden bed I'd planted with tulips that never quite took. This house had my sweat in it. My money. My time. My dreams. But it didn't have my future anymore. And that realization didn't break me. It freed me. David didn't say another word. He just watched me from the porch as the sheriff drove off, his face pale and unreadable. Maya had already disappeared back into the house, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass. I turned and walked back to my car. That was the last time I stood in front of that house as someone's partner. The last time I let their choices define my worth. The last time I made myself smaller to fit into someone else's story. The weeks that followed were strangely calm. Too calm at first. I kept waiting for another explosion. For angry calls. Threats. Accusations. But they never came. Diane handled the paperwork. Everything moved forward the way she said it would. Slowly. Legally. Without drama. I stayed with Rachel a little longer, then found a small one-bedroom apartment closer to the hospital. Nothing fancy. Beige carpet. A view of the parking lot. But the heat worked. The locks were solid. And at night, no one yelled my name like it was an accusation. I bought a used recliner from a guy down the road and a cheap coffee maker from Target. The first morning I sat there drinking my coffee, listening to the low hum of traffic outside, I realized something surprising. I could breathe again. The tightness in my chest, the one I'd been carrying for months, maybe years, was gone. I hadn't even noticed I'd been holding my breath until I finally exhaled. 3 months after the sheriff came, David sent a text. Maya moved in with her new boyfriend. The apartment is tiny. Things are hard right now. Could we meet and talk? I read it once. Then again. 15 years of memories flickered through my mind. Holidays. Arguments. Quiet mornings. Promises made and broken. I felt the old pull. That instinct to fix. To soften. To take responsibility for something that wasn't mine anymore. And here's what I want you to understand. That pull never fully goes away. When you've spent years being the one who fixes things, who smooths things over, who sacrifices for peace, that instinct becomes part of your wiring. It whispers to you late at night. It tells you maybe you were too harsh. Maybe you should give them another chance. Maybe love means forgiving everything, even when there's no apology. But love doesn't mean that. Love doesn't mean erasing yourself. Love doesn't mean accepting lies to keep the peace. Real love, the kind worth having, requires truth. And truth requires accountability. And accountability requires consequences. I deleted the message. No reply. No explanation. Just silence. Not out of cruelty. out of self-respect, because I'd already given 15 years. I'd already proven my loyalty. I'd already shown up, paid up, shut up, and it still wasn't enough. And if it wasn't enough then, it would never be enough now. Some people don't want you. They want what you provide. They want your labor, your money, your silence, your smallness. They want you diminished and available. Gone but still accessible. Absent but still responsible. And the moment you stop providing those things, the moment you take up space and demand respect, they can't handle it. They call you difficult, unreasonable, unstable. They rewrite history to make you the villain in a story where you were only ever trying to survive. A month later, I ran into Mrs. Gladys at the grocery store. She was in the produce section, squeezing avocados with the intensity of a woman who'd seen too much to settle for anything less than perfect. She looked up and saw me. "Sarah," she said, and her voice carried that particular tone older women use when they know everything and are deciding how much to say. "How are you doing, honey?" "Better," I said. And it was true. She nodded like she'd expected that answer. "I always knew something was off with that girl," she said. "The way she'd come and go. Never held a job. Always had her hand out." She paused, lowering her voice even though no one was listening. "David came by last week asking if I'd seen you. Wanted to know if you were doing okay." I felt something twist in my chest. Not longing. Not regret. Just the dull ache of something that used to matter and doesn't anymore. "What did you tell him?" I asked. Mrs. Gladys smiled. Sharp. Satisfied. "I told him you were doing just fine without him. And that maybe he should have thought about that before he chose a liar over a good woman." I don't tell this story because I won. I tell it because I survived. Because I learned that loyalty doesn't mean erasing yourself. And love doesn't mean accepting a lie just to keep the peace. I didn't get justice by yelling. I didn't humiliate anyone with my hands. I let the truth do the work. I stepped back, stayed quiet, and let the paperwork speak louder than anger ever could. And if you're listening to this and it feels uncomfortably familiar, if you've ever been blamed, discarded, or made to feel invisible after giving someone your best years, know this. Walking away isn't losing. Sometimes it's the strongest thing you can do. Sometimes the most powerful word you can say is no. Sometimes the most radical act of self-love is refusing to participate in your own erasure. Because here's what they don't tell you about betrayal. The first betrayal is theirs. But the second betrayal, the one that does the real damage, is the one you commit against yourself when you stay. When you excuse. When you minimize. When you make yourself smaller and quieter and more convenient just to be tolerated. I sleep better now. I wake up in my small apartment with the beige carpet and the parking lot view, and I don't dread the day. I don't walk on eggshells. I don't monitor anyone's mood or brace for accusations or wonder what version of reality I'm going to be dealing with today. I just exist. Freely. Fully. Without apology. And that right there is worth more than any house. More than any relationship that required me to disappear. More than 15 years of trying to be enough for people who were determined to see me as too much. David called one more time, about 6 months after everything ended. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Sarah, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know I can't undo what happened. But I need you to know I was wrong." Maya admitted she made some things up. Not everything, but enough. And I should have listened to you. I should have trusted you. I was scared of losing my daughter, and I lost you instead. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know. I listened to that voicemail 3 times. And each time I felt less. The anger had burned out. The hurt had scabbed over. What was left was just a quiet, settled knowledge that some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. Some apologies come too late. And some people only value you after you're gone. I didn't call him back. I didn't need to. Because his apology, while maybe genuine, didn't change anything. It didn't give me back 15 years. It didn't erase the night I stood in the rain with nowhere to go. It didn't undo the moment he chose his daughter's lie over my truth. And it didn't make him someone I could trust again. An apology without changed behavior is just manipulation with better packaging. And I was done accepting pretty words as substitutes for actual respect. So I deleted the voicemail. And I moved on. Not because I'm cold. Not because I'm unforgiving, but because I finally learned that some chapters need to end so new ones can begin. And my new chapter doesn't have room for people who only see my value after I'm gone. Here's what nobody tells you about starting over. It's not cinematic. There's no montage of you getting stronger, no soundtrack playing while you rebuild your life brick by brick. It's quiet. It's boring. It's making coffee in a kitchen that doesn't echo with 15 years of arguments. It's coming home to silence that feels like relief instead of loneliness. It's realizing one day that you didn't think about them at all, and that realization doesn't make you sad. It makes you free. I started going to a local diner on Thursday nights. Nothing special. Just a place with good pie and waitresses who didn't ask questions. I'd sit in the same booth, order the same slice of apple pie, and read the same thriller novels I'd never had time for when I was too busy fixing other people's problems. One Thursday, a woman around my age slid into the booth across from me. "You're Sarah, right?" she asked. I looked up confused. "Do I know you?" She smiled. "Not really. But I know your story. My sister lives on Briarwood Drive. She saw everything that day with the sheriff." My stomach tightened. Here it comes, I thought. The judgment. The questions. The need to explain myself to a stranger. But she surprised me. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "What you did, standing up for yourself like that, it gave me the courage to leave my own situation. Different circumstances, same principle. I was erasing myself for people who didn't even see me." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "So, thank you for showing me what it looks like to choose yourself." She left before I could respond. And I sat there with my coffee going cold, feeling something crack open inside me. Not pain, not sadness. Something else. Purpose. Because that's the thing about surviving betrayal and coming out the other side. Your story stops being just yours. It becomes a mirror for other people. A permission slip. A roadmap. And maybe that's why it hurts so much. So it could mean something later. I started sleeping through the night. No more waking up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing. No more replaying conversations, wondering what I could have said differently. No more checking my phone hoping for an apology that would make it all make sense. I just slept. Deep. Dreamless. The sleep of someone who'd finally put down a weight they'd been carrying for far too long. At work, I got promoted. Not because of some dramatic transformation, but because I started showing up differently. Focused. Present. Not distracted by the chaos of a home life that was slowly killing me. My supervisor called me into her office one afternoon. "I don't know what changed," she said, "but you're different. Sharper. More confident. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." I almost laughed. What I'm doing is living alone and eating cereal for dinner. What I'm doing is not answering calls from people who only valued me when I was useful. What I'm doing is choosing myself every single day, even when it feels selfish, even when it feels hard, even when the old programming tells me I should be smaller and quieter and more convenient. But I didn't say any of that. I just smiled and said, "Thank you. I'm trying." 6 months after the sheriff showed up at Briarwood Drive, I sold the house. Diane handled everything. I never went back inside. Never walked through the rooms one last time. Never said goodbye to the space I'd poured myself into for 15 years. I didn't need to. That house wasn't my home anymore. It was just a structure. For walls and a roof. And structures can be sold. The closing took 20 minutes. I signed papers. Shook hands with the buyers, a young couple with a baby on the way. They were so excited. So hopeful. So convinced that this house would be the foundation of their happily ever after. I didn't tell them what happened there. I didn't warn them about the ghosts of betrayal that might linger in the kitchen where I was accused, or the porch where I was cast out. I just wished them well and walked away. With the money from the sale, I bought a small house on the other side of town. 2 bedrooms. A yard just big enough for a garden. A porch with a swing that creaked when the wind blew. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Fully. Legally. Emotionally. Mine. And that mattered more than square footage or granite countertops or any of the things I thought I wanted when I was younger. I planted roses in the front yard. The kind that take years to establish. The kind that require patience and care and the belief that you'll still be there to see them bloom. And when I knelt in the dirt, hands deep in soil, I realized something profound. I was planting roots again. Not for someone else. For me. One evening, Rachel came over with a bottle of wine and a bag of takeout. We sat on my new porch, watching the sun set over the neighborhood, and she asked the question I'd been avoiding. Do you miss him? I thought about it. Really thought about it. I miss who I thought he was, I said finally. I miss the version of us that existed before I realized love wasn't supposed to feel like disappearing. But the real him? The man who chose his daughters lie over my truth? No, I don't miss that at all. Rachel nodded. Good. Because that man didn't deserve you. We sat in silence for a while. Comfortable silence. The kind you can only have with people who've seen you at your lowest and didn't turn away. You know what's wild? I said. I spent 15 years trying to be enough for him. Trying to be patient enough, understanding enough, supportive enough. And it was never enough. But now? Sitting here in my own house, drinking cheap wine and eating Chinese food out of the container, I feel like enough. Just as I am. Rachel raised her glass. To being enough, she said. We clinked glasses. And for the first time in years, I believed it. Maya reached out 8 months after everything fell apart. Not directly. She sent a message through a mutual acquaintance. Tell Sarah I'm sorry. Tell her I was going through a lot and I made some bad choices. Tell her I hope she's doing okay. I read the message 3 times. And each time I felt less. The mutual acquaintance waited for a response. What should I tell her? She asked. Nothing, I said. Don't tell her anything. Because here's what I learned about apologies that come through intermediaries, about regrets delivered secondhand, about sorries that only show up after consequences arrive. They're not for you. They're for them. They're about easing their guilt, not acknowledging your pain. They're about making themselves feel better, not making things right. A real apology shows up in person. It takes responsibility without excuses. It doesn't ask for forgiveness. It just offers truth. And Maya's secondhand sorry didn't meet any of those standards. So I let it fade into the background noise of a life I'd already moved past. Let me tell you what I know now that I didn't know 15 years ago when I met David and thought love meant sacrifice. Love doesn't mean sacrifice. Partnership does. But partnership is mutual. It's both people carrying weight, both people showing up, both people choosing each other even when it's hard. What I had wasn't partnership. It was servitude. I was the one who sacrificed. I was the one who showed up. I was the one who chose him again and again while he chose comfort. Chose avoidance. Chose his daughter's feelings over my reality. And that's not love. That's convenience. And I'm worth more than being convenient. I started dating again. Nothing serious. Just coffee with a man I met at the hardware store. Dinner with a woman from my book club. Conversations that didn't feel like negotiations. Laughter that didn't come with conditions. I wasn't looking for forever. I was just remembering what it felt like to be seen. To be valued. To be chosen without having to earn it through labor and silence and smallness. 1 year after the sheriff showed up at Briarwood Drive, I ran into David at the grocery store. Same one where I'd seen Mrs. Gladys. Different section. He was in the cereal aisle, staring at boxes like they held the answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. He looked older. Grayer. Tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He saw me and froze. Sarah, he said. And his voice cracked on my name like it hurt to say it. I stopped my cart. Looked at him. Really looked at him. And felt nothing. Not anger. Not hurt. Not even pity. Just a quiet, settled indifference. David, I said. Neutral. Polite. The way you'd greet a former coworker you didn't particularly like. How are you? He asked, and the question sounded desperate. Like my answer mattered. Like he needed to know I was suffering so he could feel less guilty. Or maybe he needed to know I was thriving so he could stop hoping I'd come back. I'm good, I said. And it was true. Really good. He nodded. Opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. I tried calling. Left messages. I know, I said. He waited for more. An explanation. An invitation. Anything. I gave him nothing. Maya's struggling, he said finally. The charges, the debt, it's been hard on her. And there it was. Even now, even after everything, he wanted me to care about Maya's struggles, to sympathize, to soften, to make it easier for them. I looked at him and said the truest thing I'd said in a year. That's not my problem anymore. His face collapsed, like I'd reached into his chest and pulled out something vital. Sarah, I know I messed up. I know I should have believed you. I just thought you thought wrong, I said. Not angry, not bitter, just factual. And now we both have to live with that. I pushed my cart forward, walked past him, didn't look back. And as I turned the corner into the next aisle, I felt something lift off my shoulders. The last thread connecting me to that life. The last hope that maybe, somehow, we could salvage something from the wreckage. Gone. Cut clean. And I was lighter for it. So let me ask you something. If you're listening to this and you see yourself in my story, if you're the one making yourself smaller, quieter, more convenient for people who barely notice you exist, what are you waiting for? What magical moment do you think is coming that will make them finally see your worth? What perfect combination of words do you think will make them choose you the way you've been choosing them? I'll tell you the truth. That moment isn't coming. Those words don't exist. Because people who truly value you don't need to be convinced. They don't need to be begged. They don't need you to shrink so they can feel big. They just see you. And they choose you. Every day. Without hesitation. Without conditions. Without making you earn what should be freely given. And if the people in your life aren't doing that, if you're constantly proving your worth, constantly justifying your existence, constantly apologizing for taking up space, then you're not in a relationship. You're in an audition that never ends. And you deserve better than that. You deserve to be someone's choice, not their backup plan. You deserve to be valued, not tolerated. You deserve to exist fully without apology. I'm not going to stand here and tell you leaving is easy. It's not. It's terrifying. It's lonely. It's starting over when you thought you were already home. But I will tell you this. That terror is temporary. That loneliness fades. And starting over? Starting over is where you finally meet yourself. The real you. The one who's been buried under years of compromise and silence and making yourself small. And that person? The one you've been hiding? She's incredible. She's strong and brave and worthy of every good thing. And she's been waiting for you to choose her the way you've been choosing everyone else. So choose her. Choose yourself. Walk away from the people who make you feel invisible. Sell the house. Delete the messages. Plant new roots. And watch what grows when you finally give yourself the love you've been pouring into people who couldn't even see you. Because you're not a supporting character in someone else's story. You're the protagonist in your own. And it's time you started acting like it. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been made to feel crazy for telling the truth? Have you ever been the one holding everything together while everyone else fell apart? Have you ever chosen someone who didn't choose you back? Drop your story in the comments. Let's talk about it. Let's stop pretending this doesn't happen. Let's stop making excuses for people who erase us. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you feel seen or understood or less alone, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more real stories about dignity, truth, and the quiet power of choosing yourself. Because we're not done here. Not even close. Thank you for listening. And remember, walking away isn't losing. Sometimes it's the only way to win.